Alright, one thing I've already taken off that I will not include in talking about this is the sway bar. It's literally two 15mm bolts on each side, and this pulls right out of the front of the twin I-beam. You will not be reusing that, and they claim you do not need that, so we will see down the road. However, I've already taken that off for this. Alright guys, I went ahead and took the wheels off on my E350. It is a 22mm. I do have a breaker bar I leave in there, just in case I don't either have the powered version here. This is the big impact wrench. Alright, I lifted the front up. It is supported by, I've got some 12-ton jacks. Don't think I need quite 12 ton. However, the 12 tons do have almost 25 inches of lift. And so that's going to give me a little bit more room for working, allow all the suspension to droop out, and they've been working perfectly. Alright, just to make everything swivel a little bit better, I'm going to undo the tie rod ends towards the beginning. I'm just going to get this cotter pin out, which is excessively long. When I work on my vehicles, I try to always use the things that I'm going to have on me or the things that I'm going to carry on a trip. Not that I'd be changing out my tie rod ends probably in the middle of nowhere, but I do carry my Leatherman pretty much daily, so it's just easy to grab that. And we will get that pushed out. Alright, taking off the tie rod end. Got the cotter pin out with the Leatherman. This is a 21 inch, and we're just going to zip that off. Pop right out. We will kind of move this to the side. We'll get all this cleaned up before we reinstall everything. However, what that is going to do is allow me to swivel the knuckle as I'm working with the brakes and working on everything else. That is now out of my way. Alright, now we'll get the brakes off. One of the things I'm going to do is this sort of ABS sensor. I'm going to unclip that so I'm not pulling on it. The other one is just kind of hanging off on the far side. Alright, one of the things I'm going to do before I undo my brake calipers, I'm going to create a little bit of a hanger here. Alright, so the brake caliper's got to come off. It's going to be these two 21mm bolts. There's one top and one bottom. Alright, these are just going to slide off. Alright, brake caliper is hanging off the little wire jig that we made, and that's just so you don't overstress the actual brake lines. You don't want them hanging from just a brake line. As well as the ABS or whatever the sensor line is there. It's also a good time to check, I guess, the overall bearings. So before I undid the wheel and I had it jacked up, I checked for any slop, up, down, left, right. It's also a good time. There's nothing impeding. No weird noises. It spins freely. I can go ahead and try and do this one hand, but we can pull this bearing cap off and look at the bearings and look at the grease. And I did it to the other side already. And the bearings were very well greased, but it was very black. So I'm probably going to go through, clean that out, repack the bearings, and put in there. But we can do this with that whole piece out. So next what we're going to do is we're going to get the knuckle off back. Alright, now on my 01 E350, which is actually more of a transit bus, I've got a ball joint on the top and bottom. I imagine yours is going to be very similar. And I've also got a ton of dirt and grease in here. So it has been very well serviced because there's lots of fresh grease hiding underneath all this dirt. And so what I've been doing is going through just with a screwdriver, kind of cleaning up a lot of the loose grease, dirt, and then shop vacuuming it so I'm not laying in all this greasy dirt. And then we're going to clean it up before we reinstall it. What we're going to do here is this has a cotter pin just like our tie rod end and the larger castle nut, and we'll take that off. And then the upper side up here is what they call the eccentric, I believe is what they call it. This is what's going to align the knuckle. It's shimmed in a way that as you rotate this, it will move your knuckle so that you get your proper alignment. And there's one bolt right in the front that I'll show you. Do be careful when you're going right in here. There is a seal, so just don't go nuts and potentially rip that seal on there. Alright, let me get this cleaned up a little bit and I'll be right back. Alright, we're going to take this top clamp off that eccentric bolt. That's going to be a 15 mil. Alright, we've got the top bolt out that's pinching the top ball joint and the eccentric. I think that's what it's called. And the bottom ball joint is going to be a big 1/8 and 1 inch. So it's going to take some force. I'm going to move the I'm going to move the camera so I can actually get a hammer behind. There we go. Alright, now that we've got this loosened up, the top is undone. This, I'm leaving threads on this because this whole hub assembly is extremely heavy and you do not want it dropping onto your foot. So what I'm going to do is basically just be smacking the knuckle here, so forgive the noise, until this loosens up, and it should drop onto where the castle nut is still threaded, and at which point I will kind of jack this up or put my foot underneath it so it doesn't just fall to the ground and control drops. But keep in mind, this thing is extremely heavy, so you either need to call a neighbor, get a jack, or just be prepared to handle that weight. Alright, it took about 20 smacks or so. I probably sped up this footage, knowing me. Again, I've got everything sprayed down, so everything should be fairly loose. If you need to, you've got at least, this is a 12-inch Stanley. You can take a good crescent wrench and just kind of loosen up that eccentric, make sure it's not totally seized, but the middle will still spin with that ball joint. So it's nice to loosen up, but at this point I'm going to vacuum up everything on below, and we're going to slowly pull this out onto my foot. So as I'm doing this, I know I'm going to get the question, how do I do this if I'm only by myself? Well, I just for the heck of it saw if the tire would fit under there, and the tire does fit. So you could potentially kind of pop that off onto the tire and brace it, and then roll it on the ground. Alright, there's that top eccentric bolt. You can see how it's closer on one side, farther on the other way. So as you spin that, you can change the caster and camber. I don't remember which is which, so forgive me. But we will be reusing this, so go ahead and save that. Next up, in order to get the rest of the springs out, we're going to get the shock out next. It is a 19 millimeter on the back. On the back side of this, it's hard to film. I'll throw in the photo. There's a stud welded in here, and on the back side is that shock. So in order to get that, let this droop all the way, because right now the shock is holding this up, then we can get this coil pulled out. Alright, bottom is now loose, and now we're going to run a 19 back here, 19 wrench, and try to get that. If it's super tight on there, you'll need a 19 on the bottom, as well as a 19 back here on top of the nut. Alright, with the shock removed, we're going to switch to a 10 millimeter, and we're going to take this little retainer off the top, and then that coil should just be able to pull it right in. Just there. Now you're just about there. Got a couple more bolts to take out, and we'll have this whole front end done. Alright, now one of the things I'm going to get is there's a huge through bolt that goes through the top of this, all the way through this casting, and down to this big nut. It is bigger than the 1/8 and 1 inch that I had previously. This looks like it is 1 5/16. And to go in the right direction, this top may start spinning at some point. I'm going to put a lot of force on the bottom and make sure that I'm away from the jack stands and clear the vehicle while I'm doing this. And if I notice the top is spinning, and I think it's a 21 or a 22, I'll check here in a second, as I did on the other side. Alright, now I've left that bolt in the I-beam there from the radius arm, so that when I come back here and I undo this guy, which is, we're back to an 1/8 and an 1/8, inch and an 1/8, that it actually won't turn. So if you try to do this when it's completely apart, it will turn. And I'm not sure if I can do this with one hand. Let's find out. And there you go. Alright, last two bolts. They just get these main twin I-beams off for just a 21 millimeter. I want to show you the peg that you can now see that holds the shock. New one is going to be right here in the standard shock mount. Thanks for all the love and support. You guys are amazing. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow the adventure on social media, and we'll see you on the road.